Hi, Philippe.
Hi,
How are you doing?
I'm great.
All right, some introduction for the people who are watching this.
Okay.
You're Philippe Harewood,
Yes.
our best researcher here at Meta Bug Bounty
If
Program.
you say so.
Yeah. Me, I'm Samuel, Bug Bounty Engineer in Meta Bug Bounty Program, and
Yeah.
I wanted to do this interview because I think it's a good milestone to do an interview. Now it's been 10 years that you work on our Bug Bounty Program.
That's correct.
Yeah, so let's jump into the question, but if you want to talk about anything, just feel free to go in any subject.
Fire away.
Yeah, so the first thing I think people want to know is how it all started. How did you got interested in tech, and how did you got into security and bug bounty then?
Okay. So before I started Bug Bounty, probably the first few years before that, I was a participant in stackoverflow.com. So I used to answer a lot of programming questions. So that's when I used to start now learning about programming. So I tried to learn programming through answering people's questions. And at that time, I was very interested in Facebook at the time because I was one of the first early users in Facebook in university. So a lot of my programming questions used to revolve around Facebook API. And with that, it gave me a lot of knowledge and context to understand a lot of things that happened in Facebook. But I didn't actually start doing Facebook White Hat until about a year or two later. So when I first saw Facebook White Hat program, I thought I didn't have the skills for it. So I just kind of like, oh, this is expert stuff, it's a hacker stuff. I don't know anything about this, so I'm just going to leave it to the side.
And just for context for people watching this, this was back in 2014?
So if I started in 2013, 2014, I started Stack Overflow probably like 3 or 4 years before that. So I used to be a moderator on one of these Stack Exchange sites called webapplications.com, where I'd answer a lot of Facebook questions. So I had a lot of context in terms of Facebook questions at the time. So I knew a lot about Facebook before I actually started hunting on Facebook. So that helped a lot.
Okay. And you were a big Facebook user, I guess?
Yeah, I was a power user.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that's interesting. And then what was your first bug? How did it go?
My first bug was with some third-party integration with the API. So essentially, at the time, Facebook allowed certain third-party providers to have access to the API, and with that, if you logged in as your user, you could get an access token that would request certain data. And I realized that one of it was a very crude named app at the time. It's called like Bang with Friends or something like that. Okay. And I was able to like request some data out of there that I shouldn't have normally been able to request easily. And that was my first go through with that. But I sent like reports before that weren't valid, but it gave me an idea of, okay, what could be valid after that.
Yeah, interesting that you started with that, because I think that's one aspect where Meta Facebook at the time has improved a lot, like third-party apps and the permissions in third-party apps and how that data is handled. It went from very little permission and a lot of issues, a lot of lacks in terms of granularity in permissions to now where we are in a way better state. And another thing I think people are interested in is how does your life look like now? Like, what's your routine as a bug bounty hunter? What's the typical day look like? Do you work every day? All these kind of things.
Okay, so a typical day for me would be I'd probably wake up like, I have a really bad sleeping schedule because there was a period of time in Facebook that I set up the script to send me assets, but I did it in a way that it didn't have a specified time. So whenever asset appeared, it would send me a notification in my messenger. So I'd wake up at 3 a.m. and I'd look at an asset. And that is not a good thing to do because it messes up my sleep schedule so bad. So nowadays, I tend to wake up at 4 or 5 a.m. It just happens. And since I'm up already, I'll run my computer. So I have like one main Ubuntu computer. It's like 64 gigabytes of memory. I have the next one is like a 128 gigabytes of memory to handle all the JavaScript data. I have one computer which is a Windows. So I have 3 workstations, my work laptop, and I have a next laptop for fuzzing. So it's like 5 workstations in all. So I will do a run script on it in the morning, see if any new assets come up, and I'll let it run. It'll run for probably 2 or 3 hours. So in that time, I'll probably go to the gym, do a workout, come back, shower, everything, check it out. If there's anything vulnerable, I'll do a report. If not, I will decide what kind of research topic I'm going to do for the day and go from there. So if it's like a private program, for example, in the months last year, like from September to December, I was in a private program, and essentially I'll do my regular work first, and then I'll do research for the rest of the day. So I'd like go out to Starbucks and like do a lot of research for like hours on end until like probably 6 or 7 at night.
Okay, that's very interesting. So you really had to build that work-life balance yourself.
Yeah.
And I guess it was very important to be efficient.
Yeah, so like I'd say that because of the pandemic, I had to change up a lot because I used to do all my JavaScript generation stuff on one laptop, like a very old MacBook Air. And obviously the scale of Facebook can't handle just one laptop, and that laptop crashed and died. And I got very sad, and from then I just invested money in buying a whole set of workstations. I have a lot of backup disks to use so that I don't end up in that problem ever again.
And do you find you work better at a Starbucks than in your home?
I would say that for certain research areas, I need a different environment. I need something that's not comfortable.
Interesting.
So if it's not comfortable, then my mind is able to just focus on what is going on, because otherwise, if I'm back at home, I just focus on everything. But if I'm like in a different environment, all I can do is just focus on this one particular private program or this one particular research area to do stuff.
Interesting. Yeah, we'll talk about your how your day look like. I think an interesting point as well is you mentioned very quickly, like you have your routine, and at some point in your day you decide what you're gonna research.
Yeah.
And how do you actually decide that? Like, how do you have a target?
It would either be, it depends on either like say the scripts, if they return back an ask area that I'm trying to figure out. So say if it's AI, right? And AI appears, I'll be like, okay, I'm going to look at AI for the rest of the day. But say if it just returns some regular scripts, some business ad stuff, I was like, okay, well, I've seen this before, so I'm going to go back to some previous work that I wrote down in a journal maybe a few weeks ago, maybe a few months ago, and go back to stuff. Because there are certain aspects that I'll reach a certain area and I'm not finding this vulnerable, and I'm like, okay, I'll hold on to this and I'll come back to this research a little later. So I have like many different parts that I've not completed that I always try to come back to. So there's always something to go back to. So that's why when people ask me, it's like, how do you know where to go? It's like, I don't. It's just the assets will tell me, or I'll probably just like choose an area and be like, okay, I'm going to check here again because I want to, and see if something happens.
Okay, interesting. And where do you find all the drive to do this? Like, because we know that for like self-employed people, and especially for bug bounty hunter, it can be very hard to have the motivation to do that every day, to have the personal like way of like following your routine, following your research, not getting unmotivated when you're not finding stuff and so on. So how do you deal with all that?
I think I might be a little biased on it, but I feel that there's like a personal kind of attribute a person has to be a bounty hunter that allows them to really dig into something. So say you find a feature and you're like, okay, I want to find something in this feature, and you're in your head, you've already decided that it's vulnerable. You're going to spend the next 5 days, day and night, without sleep, making sure you could find that feature, and it's going to happen no matter what. And somehow it just works out. Obviously, there are times it might not work out, but most of the time it tends to work out, and I don't know why. And that's tends to driven me a lot. For times when that doesn't happen, obviously I'll go back to my notes and be like, okay, well, today wasn't a really good day, but I learned that this is what I can do for progress, or I've learned that this is what this feature does. Even if I haven't figured out it's vulnerable, I know it's exactly what this feature does. So if it ever changes again, I'll be the first to know. In terms of like on the mental side, I do a lot of yoga. I do a lot of meditation. I do a lot of hiking. So because, as I said, since I wake up at 5 and I check these computers all through the day, like my mind is always like, it's like a big fuzz of just questions of like, oh, what do you do this? What if I do this? What if I do this? Is this vulnerable? And I needed time to shut it off. So when I go for walks, that's my time to shut it off. I take off my phone and I don't listen to anything. I just go for like walks for like 4 hours straight and just listen to the nature, because it just resets my body system.
Interesting. And more specifically about the frustration of not finding something, like after 10 years of doing that activity, do you still have this kind of frustration sometime? And how do you deal with it if you do?
Yeah, I would say I still do. And what I've recognized is that, like yesterday, I was talking to some other researchers, and I realized that we share the same kind of thought patterns when it comes to that, in terms of like not finding stuff, and that helps to empathize with other people and realize that you're just human, and these people at these companies actually are doing work. They're doing great defense. So if you're not finding something, it's like, okay, well, they're actually finally doing good work. You know, it's not a bad thing. It's like, oh, I've not been able to hack them. It's a good thing for them, you know. But you keep forgetting that you're not supposed to be always malicious. Like, there are times when things are actually going to go well, defense-wise. But I'd say as well, the times when I'm really on down on it and I'm like, okay, I haven't been able to find something, or it's been a while since I found like a really valuable bug, I'll like re-engage myself and just reorganize my thoughts and be like, okay, I prioritize this, let's put this to the side and try something else. Or maybe I'll just go back just through some old reports or some old notes and say, okay, you looked at it this way, how about let's try looking at it this way instead. Let's try looking at it a very, very random way and see what that does instead. Yeah.
Okay, interesting. Interesting. Now let's maybe talk about an example. Do you have so two things? Do you have like a moment, either a bug that you found or something that happened during like your bug bounty career that you find like interesting and you want to share, or like maybe an interesting bug or something?
I would say anything that gets me closer to internal just feels very juicy to me. Like the closer I am to internal, I feel like you can get to some very nice data. So anything with like say like an app access token where I can like control stuff, or if I can get to internal settings and I can realize, okay, these are what employees see from inside, it gives me a better idea of what I can attack from the external side. So there was a bug with my Instagram app token I was able to find in the blocks.
I remember that
there
one.
is some situations with SSRF where it's like, okay, well, I'm able to execute requests internally. What can I get away with internally while executing those requests? It's like, yes, I was able to like hit the SSRF, but what happens after that? You know, those kind of things are very interesting to me. Yes, a lot of people see me for my GraphQL bugs, but I think GraphQL is just my tool to get around to all the other stuff that happens in Facebook.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I see. That's interesting. And do you get sometimes frustrated knowing that sometimes you have to stop looking into what you were looking because you have eaten like too far into intern, and you risk like, you know?
Yes. Yeah. That's a frustrating point, because as a bounty hunter, you want to get your maximum impact. Maximum impact, obviously maximum money. But if you get stopped and then they're like, okay, well, we're going to pay you this amount, and you're like, well, what if I actually just did it this instead? You know, then you started thinking like in the back of your head, it's like, oh, I should have gone further and just shown them like I could really damage company. But then you start getting really malicious. So there's a balance between showing people, okay, I'm demonstrating proof of concept, but I also want a maximum risk. If I can't agree with the maximum risk with you, am I allowed to go further to show you that I can actually get real maximum risk with that?
So staying ethical, you know. Right?
Yeah, staying ethical, it's a tough thing, because you see other researchers and they might get away with something that you don't get away with, or you might get away with something that they don't get away with, and that balance is very tricky.
All right, interesting. And what do you think about the bug bounty industry, and especially like now the place it has in the security industry overall? Like, what do you think there is a lot of growth for bug bounty? How do you think that bug bounty is benefiting company, and how do you think all this is going to evolve?
I think it's getting a lot better. I think in the past, security has viewed bounty hunters as script kiddies, and like they viewed us as below them a lot. I've seen a lot of people in the past who looked down on me, and these days I realize they see me at a level as them. People from very high privileged areas in security are now actually supporting bug bounty, whereas as opposed to 5 years ago, they'd be making fun of it or making jokes about it. There are people who have made assumptions of how our motivations go. There's this one person, they made a paper and said like, these are the motivations of bounty hunters, and it was based on actually Facebook data. And I read that report, and I was like, that's not how I'm motivated at all, you know. So it's all these assumptions that used to happen in the previous years. I'm glad that they're slowly like going away, and they're realizing that we are very unique in different ways. We share some similar ideas, but we do things totally differently. So we've matured a lot. There's still a lot of room for growth, especially like say in Meta, where going to the hardware space, going to the AI space, and it gets very complex in ways that it kind of opens your brain a bit to more knowledge areas. Yeah, web is there, web will always be there, but getting to other areas is pretty cool as well.
And what do you think would make what practice or what companies should do to make in general bug bounty better in the future?
I think ensuring that the security team is well balanced with either like ex-bounty hunters and ex-security engineers from previous bounty teams as well.
So the response team that responds to the...
Yeah, the response to communication as well. Because I've realized with smaller companies, if you send them a report, there are things that you recognize that they don't have experience with, as opposed to a mature company. You'll send a report to a small company and I'll say, hey, here's my report, and the company will be like, how did you do that? You're not supposed to do that. I was like, well, I can, because you just do this. And you realize that they don't have the context that a lot of bigger companies have when it comes to those protections. So
yeah, one thing like that's more my opinion. What I think would be better is to really make a consistent ways of paying out things. And personally, I think that at Meta we do it well. We pay based on impact, and we think about the impact first instead of thinking sometimes in terms of class of
right.
issues.
Yeah. So I'm not really a fan of CVSS.
Yeah.
I do not like it at all because it doesn't give a proper representation of what the impact for a bug compared to a company is. It just gives an impact in general. So say if I find an account takeover in a health app versus a finance app versus Facebook, there is different business impact there, and it will be rated differently. The CVS does not take that into account.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Another thing that I wanted to ask, actually, I think it's a nice question. If you had the CISO of Meta in front of you, what would you tell him? What would you ask him about security in general? What do you think we should improve at Meta?
For bounty hunters?
For bounty hunters, or maybe just security in general. How would you make Meta security, specific to Meta, better?
It would have to be giving the service area to external testers to get to that area, to get to tests, because that introduces a huge area of vulnerability that we're not able to get to. So if me as an external person is not able to get to it, that means no one until that point happens will be able to get to it. So if you get attacked, it'll be a blind spot. So I think getting to those areas where regulation happens, where legal happens, where country restrictions happen, needs to be enforced a bit better, because it just creates a lot of blind spots for people.
Yeah. Okay, so really increasing the surface by giving you access to stuff you may not have access to. Okay.
And also, I guess, providing more education internally, not just to security engineers, but to the regular software engineers, so that they understand better the product that they're building, because sometimes they might build in a product-oriented way, but they would forget the security aspect of it.
Yeah, on this point, I definitely agree. I think in general in the industry, software engineers maybe sometimes lack of security education, I would say, and it should definitely be part of all university.
So that
shouldn't be a specialization. If
exactly.
you study software engineering, you should learn about security.
Right. So even in a lot of university courses, the security aspect is very low down. Yeah. It's not there. They would have demonstrations of applications. Okay, you can build this sign-in app, and you watch the sign-in app, and it's oh my gosh, all the security controls are off. And software engineers are learning that from the get-go, and they're going into the industry with that. So it helps a lot.
All right, thank you for these suggestions. Another question I have now is, what tips and what would you suggest to bug bounty hunters? Do you have tips for them, recommendation? You already gave a bit by giving your routine and so on, but specific things?
For recommendations, I would say to ramp up your knowledge as quickly as possible. So the same way in universities, when you do cramming sessions, use that same kind of ideas to try to ramp up your knowledge. So when it comes to, for example, Facebook itself, there's a lot of deep technical knowledge you need to know in certain areas, whether that may be JavaScript, hoisting, whether that may be reverse engineering, smally code. All these stuff take a lot of work and a lot of context to handle. For example, for myself, I have to do a lot of context switches and I need breaks between them because I might be thinking about this one thing. I have to pause my brain and be like, okay, now I need to think about this other thing and I need to just not dump it, but I need to pause all the questions I had in the previous context. So being able to switch context very easily, being able to be very adaptable really helps in the bounty world. And I would say to have a community. It doesn't have to be like a huge community. It could be your friend group, like a group of 4, and somebody you can bounce ideas off, somebody you can empathize with, so that you don't get into that mental aspect of like, I'm not finding bugs. And you look on Twitter and you see everyone is like showboating, bragging about themselves. It's like, oh, everyone is successful, but it's like, no. Everyone is just showing their positive. Everybody's just showing what they do good. They're not showing their failures. They're not showing those months of time that they will blood, sweat, and tears. So that is very important to keep you going. In terms of tooling, Chrome Developer Tools is very underlooked. It is a very quick way to really get yourself going because you wouldn't have to install a lot of apps into your device. So you could be at a hotel or airport, or you could be at the beach and you could just open your browser and you can start testing one time. And that can get you in a very nice flow if you're like, you see a feature just only spotting. It's like, okay, I see a feature, open Chrome Inspect, I could go to the JavaScript and quickly go into it. For reverse engineering, I would say to pick up some of the books out there. I can't really call out the names in my head right now, but there are a few books out there that you can learn some reverse engineering with, and it's really helpful for me particularly because a lot of, I think, difficulties a lot of Facebook researchers have, for example, is like cert pinning, and I find that now to be a very trivial thing to get across, but that's because I have a very strong reverse engineering experience at the moment. But before, I would be that person like, okay, where in Google do I need to find a tool that will give me the ability to take off cert pinning? And when I passed that point of like, wow, it really was a totally different person I was back then that didn't have that kind of knowledge to know about that. So when you increase your layers of knowledge, you peel back those layers of defense and you peel back those layers of obfuscation that before seemed so impossible to get to.
Okay, very interesting, very interesting. I don't really have any question left in my questions. Do you have anything you want to talk about?
I would say for bounty hunters to continue to share knowledge because it's the only way for all of us to get it to progress, because the more knowledge collectively combined is the more unique ideas going forward. If the knowledge is gated, we'll never reach to a point where it gets fancier, it gets more complex, you know?
Definitely. And I can like witness for this. I witnessed so many bug bounty hunters telling you that they started bug bounty because of all the educational content that you put out there and all the things that you share and so on. And I think it should be both done by the researcher and actually by us. Like I think Meta should share also more and even like push the research of the researcher more broadly and communicate about it and so on and so on.
Yeah, because I think we can get to a point where a bounty hunter is actually a very specialized person who can have a very vast depth tome of knowledge for themselves, and that can get them into a lot of different careers, you know, not just software engineering security. It could be endless, you know, so that really, really helps. I mean, the knowledge that I have when I started versus the knowledge I have now, it's invaluable. Invaluable. I would never get it anywhere else.
All right. Thank you, Philippe.
No worries.